Excellent, merci. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today. And before I begin, let me first acknowledge that I'm joining you virtually from here in Halifax, which of course is part of the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also want to say thank you to those who are working under somewhat challenging circumstances, given the situation in Ottawa, who are members of the press. The work you do is essential to our country and to our democracy, and I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for joining me here this morning. Merci de me rejoindre ce matin. I'd like to reflect to open things on the fact that, with the exception of Indigenous peoples, everyone in Canada has an immigration story somewhere in their past. Canada has been a land of opportunity for millions of people, whether they're from Scotland, like my ancestors, or from Asia, Africa, Europe, the Americas, and everywhere else. Immigrants have helped to build our great country as to what it has become today. Canada's story is largely built on many stories, millions of stories of immigration. And our country is a destination of choice for hundreds of thousands of people from around the world every year. Canadians have long been proud that so many people wish to come here and begin a new life in our country. Now, we've shown the rest of the world how people from different backgrounds, from different parts of the world, can live peacefully together to create one of the most prosperous and inclusive countries on the planet. Newcomers have long been major economic contributors to our country, and the last 2 years in particular have underscored just how crucial immigration is to Canada and to our communities. Newcomers are key to addressing the labor shortage that Canada faces and to building back stronger from the pandemic. Newcomers have played an essential role on the front lines of the pandemic in our hospitals, in food production, working in agricultural operations, on farms big and small right across the country, working in the manufacturing sector, making sure we have access to the goods that we need in the transportation sector to make sure that we can have those goods not just produced in Canada, but that we have access to them in our communities. In recognition of immigration's importance to Canada, and in spite of the pandemic's many challenges, Canada was still able to achieve record-setting admissions last year. We welcomed over 405,000 new permanent residents in 2021, which is the largest number of permanent residents ever welcomed in Canadian history. Now, high levels of immigration create many opportunities for our country, but they're not without challenges. As we know, especially over the past 2 years, there have been significant challenges. And let me just reflect on the first few months I've had the good fortune of being in this position. I've been doing a lot of listening. I've been hearing from folks who said, it's very impressive and very important that across the system you were able to process a record new number of newcomers. But at an individual level, the user experience has been defined for many people by frustrations that they have when they try to come to Canada. These are people who are trying to come fill gaps in the labor forces so Canadian businesses can make more money and put more Canadians to work as well. These are people who are trying to reunite with their families, who've been missing their spouses or their kids. And for far too many, some of the delays that we've seen over the course of this pandemic and the long response time for application updates have caused them to put their life on hold. Now, one of the things I want to drive home is that these challenges are not by design. They are a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's difficult when you try to welcome a record number of newcomers at a time when public health guidelines and border closures and travel restrictions worldwide have created unprecedented obstacles for people to come to Canada and in turn for our immigration system in Canada. Given these challenges, we had to pivot our strategy, and we made the most of talent that existed within our borders already during the pandemic, which was the right thing to do at the time. The majority of new permanent residents last year were already in Canada on some kind of temporary status, and 62% were economic immigrants who are going to help us rebuild our economy. And though this is a bright spot for those who were here already, it did create significant inventories and processing delays for many of our overseas applicants, the human beings who want to come to Canada, who were most affected by travel restrictions. Now, we know that many talented and skilled newcomers have been waiting for a very long time, and we understand that they simply want to come to Canada as soon as possible, and I want them to know that Canada wants you here too. I want you to know that we're doing everything we can to process your application as soon as possible. And our department at Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada is working to deliver the best possible client experience for all those who use our services, both in Canada and overseas. But frankly, I'm more than willing to admit that we can and we must continue to do better. Now that brings me to the purpose of our discussion today. I want to walk you through certain measures that we're introducing to build upon some of the steps we've already taken that will help reduce processing times. And if I may categorize them in two buckets, so to speak. The first is efforts to reduce processing times with the $85 million that was included in the recent economic and fiscal update. The second is new functionalities that have recently come online or will be coming online soon as part of our effort to transform Canada's immigration into a modern and digital platform. We've been taking action to reduce certain application inventories that grew during the pandemic, and I want to draw your attention to a few key ones with the recent economic and fiscal update measures. There are specific lines of business that we want to be targeting. Let me start with work permits. In my conversations with Canadian businesses and the organizations that represent them, they say it's incredible that we've seen such a strong economic recovery to date with more people working today in Canada than were working before the pandemic. But there's also a major labor shortage, and we want to make sure that we can get our workers here on time. As a result of the investments in the economic and fiscal update and other measures, we expect to see work permit processing times return to the service standard this year, potentially sooner. For those international students and the institutions that seek to bring them here, I want you to know that we are, despite the fact that we've processed almost 560,000 study permit applications in 2021, which, by the way, corresponds with a 32% increase over pre-pandemic levels, which we thought were pretty big back then. We're going to be putting additional resources to get the study permit processing times back to our service standard this year in hopes that we can get as many students here on the schedule they need to complete their academic programs. We also are going to be making sure that we're putting additional resources to reduce processing times for temporary visitors to Canada. Because as the pandemic reaches a stage where we are allowed to welcome more people who want to visit Canada, we want to make sure that the process of getting them here is efficient so more people can come and spend money in Canadian businesses in sectors that have been hit particularly hard. In addition, we are going to be putting additional resources towards expediting the proof of citizenship for individuals who made it through the citizenship process and are awaiting those documents to confirm their status. And we also will be putting additional resources towards permanent residency. In particular, we do expect when it comes to permanent residency card renewals, we will be able to eliminate the inventory and get back to a stage where we're managing these card renewals as they come in. I will point out that you may have noticed the spousal reunification, which is incredibly important as a stream for people to come to Canada, was not amongst that particular list. And that's because as a result of investments that have already been made, for applications that are made today, we have already achieved the service standard of 12 months for those who are coming for family reunification purposes. I want to pivot a little bit to talk about some of the other things that we're doing. The digital system that we are building to deal with Canada's immigration is extremely important. And to help accelerate our work on the temporary side of our business, we've expanded the use of advanced analytics to help sort and process temporary residence applications. The use of data analytics systems to process some visitor visas over the past few years has allowed IRCC to process routine files 87% faster, helping some applicants get their decision sooner. But I want to be absolutely clear. An IRCC case officer will always make the final decision. The advanced analytics do not have the ability to make a refusal or even recommend a refusal. This is done exclusively by an IRCC officer. But this system will improve client service and help IRCC manage the increasing volume of visitor visa applications going forward as more people seek to come to Canada to visit. To support those who wish to live in Canada, we're also planning on finalizing 147,000 permanent residency applications in the first quarter of this year, which will double what we've done during the last year. And importantly, we're going to be expanding the permanent resident online application portal so more clients can submit application documents electronically. On this particular piece, we've been running a soft launch and a pilot phase of the digital intake system for 15 different lines of business. By this summer, we expect to have all of the cases be directed towards the digital intake system. Presently, 10 to 20% of the cases are being directed towards the digital intake system. And by this summer, we hope to dedicate all of them, or direct all of them rather, to the digital system. We will maintain the paper-based system for applications that demand it in the short term. But this is going to be a game changer for those who are seeking to come to Canada and applying for their permanent residency status through the digital portal. Still on permanent residency, and this is a big deal for family reunification. We will be launching the Permanent Resident Case Tracker in February of this year for spousal, common law, and dependent clients, allowing them to more easily access their own application information online. This is going to address one of the major frustrations that I've heard when people who are trying to get through to an overburdened system at IRCC and are calling their MP's offices trying to get updates. They will be able to get those updates themselves by logging into the new system that we're creating to give them updates on the family reunification lines of business. And for those who are already in Canada, we've now developed a portal to allow permanent residence applicants to finalize their process and receive their permanent residency cards without any in-person interaction. Over the past half a year or so, we've seen 225,000 permanent residents have used this new portal. This is particularly important because we've seen the impact of different variants on our in-person operations in different parts of the world and here in Canada as well. When the pandemic precluded the ability for someone to go in person and pick up their PR card, it meant that they had to wait until that in-person service has been restored. With the introduction of this new permanent residency card portal to finalize PR applications, people will be able to finalize their PR status without that in-person interaction, and will allow them to complete the process digitally. I also want to address another frustration that I've been hearing about, and that's the fact that there are 60,000 applicants who are in Canada today currently waiting to complete their oath of citizenship that have satisfied the other requirements of the process. Now, this is the final stage of the citizenship process. And while we've already expanded the use of citizenship ceremonies, hosting 300 virtual ceremonies each month, with more than 170,000 new Canadians being sworn in virtually since April of 2020, we know we can do more, and we continue to increase the number of new citizens. Moving forward, we're going to continue to increase the number of citizenship ceremonies, and we're looking at how we can potentially expand the number of applicants who can go through the process during an individual virtual ceremony. But we also intend to introduce an option for those who wish to quickly self-administer a digital oath by signed attestation and celebrate their citizenship at a later date. Now, once available, this has the potential to significantly shorten the waiting time for those who reach this final stage of citizenship. Finally, and this is important because it responds directly to a concern that has been raised with me on a number of occasions, there's a lot of applicants who are considering coming to Canada that look at IRCC's website for processing times. And they see that the broadcasted processing times and service standards don't necessarily match perfectly with the actual experience. We will be looking in the coming months to give our clients more up-to-date information by publishing accurate service standards, not just service standards, but status updates on the actual processing time during in different lines of business. In order to help us attract more of the people we need, Canada needs to bring our immigration system into the 21st century, and these measures are a step forward in that direction. But let me be absolutely clear. These measures are not a silver bullet. The pandemic has created challenges for our system, and they didn't create them overnight, and they won't be solved overnight. But these investments are going to make a meaningful difference, some in the short term and some in the medium term. There's lots of work to do to improve client experience in our immigration system and return to service standards that applicants and prospective Canadians could quite rightly expect us to achieve. We know that more investments and changes are going to be needed, and I look forward to keeping Canadians updated on the tools that we're working on to help us reach our goals. Throughout this pandemic, we've seen how immigration continues to benefit Canadians. It helps grow our economy. Immigration strengthens our communities across the country by making them more vibrant and dynamic places to live. Coming out of this pandemic, Canada is going to continue to need newcomers with many different skills and talents. And we're very fortunate that so many people from around the world continue to choose our country as the place to visit and build their future. Canada, in my mind, has never been a more attractive place to work, to study, and to live. And we've seen tremendous interest from people around the world who wish to call Canada home. We want to ensure this trend continues, and that's why we need to continue to transform our immigration system. We have to ensure that Canada remains competitive with other countries for the world's best talent, and we're going to do so by delivering the best possible client service. With these changes to our system, we want to solidify Canada as a top destination of choice for skilled people from all around the world. These individuals will be able to come here more quickly to begin making immeasurable and long-lasting contributions that will continue to shape the future of Canada for generations. But our work isn't finished, and we're going to move forward to make sure that Canada's proud history of immigration is matched with a modern immigration system that supports our economic recovery, improves the client experience, and strengthens our community. Thank you so much, folks. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm happy to take what questions you may have.
Thank you, Minister. So now we'll go over to the phones. Just a reminder, one question, one follow-up. Opérateur?
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 on the device's keypad if you have a question. N'hésitez pas à faire étoile 1 pour toute question. The first question is from Brajat Sohal from Red FM. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good morning, Minister. In one of your previous interviews, you mentioned that some people who have an illegal status could be given amnesty in Canada, considering their contribution to the society and economy. There are reports that currently many vulnerable women are in human trafficking trade, are stuck in there and have an illegal status. And what's preventing them to get out of it is also their immigration status in Canada. Is the government planning something regarding such vulnerable women?
First of all, thank you so much for your thoughtful question. The reality of Canadian communities includes the reality of some of the most vulnerable, including people who've been trafficked. And human trafficking is an absolute scourge on our communities and our country. My home province of Nova Scotia has a particular problem that needs to be addressed when it comes to human trafficking. One of the elements of my mandate letter requires me to develop a plan that would formalize or recognize a permanent immigration status for undocumented workers in Canada who've been making a contribution to our communities. We've not yet done the policy work that needs to be done to have confidence that we've developed the right proposal. We do have some lessons that we learned through the TR to PR pilot that granted permanent residency to some folks who were here without permanent or legal status. And we've learned some valuable lessons that has enabled people through the Guardian Angels program, for example, to continue making contributions to our communities once their status has been regularized, without fear that they will be deported if they are discovered. We're actively looking now at the lessons from the TR to PR program, and we'll be discussing this issue with stakeholder organizations and communities across Canada as I seek to develop a plan to advance that mandate commitment to regularize the status of undocumented workers, potentially including some of the vulnerable people that you've mentioned.
Right. Minister, my follow-up is regarding the student visas. You mentioned that there will be an increase and it will be expedited. Recently, the case of the family who lost their lives while crossing the border in Manitoba, one of the persons who was caught in the U.S. said he came to Canada on an illegal student visa. Has the ministry or you had a chance to look into the case and see what sort of illegal method was used to get that student visa?
Thank you, and I hesitate to get in too deep while I understand an investigation continues. Before I address your question, let me say that this job comes with some real challenging stories, and it requires a degree of compassion when you look at an absolute tragedy with a young family lost in the horrific manner that took place in Emerson, or near Emerson. And we do need to do more work to continue to promote regular pathways to Canada, and in this case, for people seeking to go to the United States. When it comes to the student visa program, there are different things that we need to do. By and large, the international student program and the issuance of study permits is an incredible strength for Canada's economy, because we know that international students make excellent permanent residents. They make incredible contributions, and they have support networks and language training and job prospects on graduation. But there are some bad actors who abuse the system. And I believe that we need to, frankly, work with the provinces and territories who have some stake in this too, so we can all do a better job of cracking down on the bad actors. The example you gave is just one, but there's no shortage of stories of students who are left without supports who come here with a belief they'll be able to study and potentially work, who've been sold a false bill of goods by people who are making significant amounts of money with a cottage industry on the other side of the world to promote their participation in Canada's international student program. We need to be cracking down on those bad actors, the institutions that don't provide supports for their students, and of course people who abuse the system, because fraudulent behavior in Canada's immigration system won't be tolerated. So I can't address the specifics of issues that are under investigation, you can appreciate, but my view is any effort to expand the program needs to be matched with an effort to further crack down on the bad actors who abuse the system.
Merci. Prochaine question, opérateur.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Ryan Tumulty from National Post. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Yeah, good morning, Minister. A couple of months ago, a memo in your department suggested that because of the backlog, the number of federally high-skilled workers that you had planned to accept this year would have to be cut potentially by as much as half. I'm wondering if you think these new changes will avoid a big reduction in your immigration plan, which I understand is coming to Parliament this month.
Thank you very much for that question. And yeah, I do intend to be tabling the immigration levels plan in February, now that Parliament has resumed. So the issue that you're focused on is an important one. It involves federal skilled workers who are seeking to come to Canada. And the starting point in this conversation for me is whether our economic programs are meeting the demands of the Canadian economy. And I can assure you that our economic programs are doing more for the Canadian economy than they ever had, as we continue to welcome record numbers of permanent residents and continue to have demand-driven programs for those who need workers here on a temporary basis. There are certain challenges that came as a result of our pivot to welcoming more and more people who were already in Canada out of necessity during the pandemic, which I reiterate was the right thing to do at the time to save our immigration system and maximize the potential economic return from an ambitious immigration plan. That has created a situation where we still have significant numbers in our inventory through existing streams aside from the federal skilled worker stream. This puts us in a position where we do have more work to do to clear some of the existing inventory before we can resume draws on the federal skilled workers program. Now, I don't have a date for you specifically today because we need to see how things flow in the months ahead before we can revisit bringing more federal skilled workers in without creating a situation where we know they will be simply waiting in the queue longer than they were previously. But these measures that we've announced today will reduce processing times for people who are in the queue, and combined with the levels plan that we table, which will welcome more and more economic migrants into Canada, is the kind of thing that gives me hope that we'll be able to return to welcoming people through the federal skilled worker program at some point. But we do have some work to do before we get there. And when we have information with specifics on timelines and the date, I'll be sure that we reach out and make that very public so that people who are expecting to come to Canada can plan accordingly.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, I'm wondering if you're concerned because of this backlog, not only do people have to wait a long time, but when there are draws, people have to have an incredibly high score to be accepted into Canada. I'm wondering if you're worried about the impact that's having on our overall immigration system, and if you're worried about, high-skilled immigrants choosing somewhere other than Canada because we have such a backlog.
So there's a couple of things that I'd respond with. When it comes to attracting skilled workers from around the world to come live and work in Canada, we are winning the global competition for talent. We are the best in the world, and I underscore this point. We are the best in the world at welcoming large numbers of economic migrants to Canada to help drive our economic growth. That said, you've honed in on something really important. A lot of the world, as a result of global consequences of COVID-19, are dealing with the same labor shortages that we are. Those who wake up to the fact that immigration provides an opportunity for them to maximize their economic potential are going to bounce out of the pandemic recession more quickly than others. Canada is very well positioned because we have a series of policies, some of which don't have as significant delays as others, including the global talent stream, including the provincial nominee programs, including the various economic pilots and the recent Atlantic immigration program that's been made permanent in my region of Canada. So across the system, to answer your question, I think Canada maintains and will maintain the top position in the world when it comes to attracting talent from around the world to fill gaps in our labor force. But we need to continue to do more because from my perspective, it's not enough just to be the best in the world because we started out as the best in the world. We need to be the best that we can be. So we need to continue to grow our immigration levels. We need to continue to invest in the resources to have reduced processing time so we can send a clear message to the world that we want workers to come to Canada to create jobs in our community and put more Canadians to work. So it's a difficult and nuanced situation to manage. But when I look across the system, there's no question in my mind that Canada remains the best in the world when it comes to welcoming large numbers of newcomers for economic purposes to fill jobs in our communities.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Shelby Tevano from CIC News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hello, Minister Fraser. Thank you for taking our questions today. So I would like to ask you about the November 24 memo. It's quite old by now, and I'm just wondering, is it true that express entry admissions will be cut in half under the new levels plan? And if so, how is that congruent with IRCC's communications in that immigration is key to economic recovery?
So look, let me build upon the answer I gave to the related question that came in just a moment ago. And you'll forgive me if I don't announce the levels plan before it's tabled in Parliament. I believe I have a responsibility to other parliamentarians to share that information with them simultaneously when I do table it in Parliament. The number one question when it comes to this issue for me is across the system, are we bringing the people to Canada for economic purposes in a way that will meet the needs of the Canadian economy? And the answer to that question in my mind is yes. We should continue to do more by focusing on both our permanent pathways to permanent residency, as well as our temporary programs, which allow people to fill short-term gaps. So to answer your question, I don't think that there are contrary messages when we're seeking to bring in more economic migrants, when one stream has been impacted by a phenomenon that was created by the pandemic. That said, we do need to do some work to clear the inventory of people who are here through economic streams now that are qualified to come through existing streams into Canada, so we can resume the activity that we're used to through the Federal Skilled Workers Program. The pause on federal skilled workers, I reassure you, is temporary, and we will be trying to process the existing inventory of applicants who are ready to come to Canada through other streams, so we can resume it as quickly as possible. It will take us some time, but in terms of your specific question about levels details, you'll have to wait a few weeks until we table the plan in Parliament.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, so according to that memo again, it suggests that for the first half of the year, Canada won't be holding draws for Federal Skilled Worker Program candidates or Canadian Experience Class candidates. So that means potentially July. And we know that there is tens of thousands of Canadian Experience Class immigrants in the in the express entry pool. We know that about 90% of them are in Canada. So what measures are you going to put in place for these candidates who would normally be able to extend their work permit if they were to receive an IPA? What measure are you going to put in place for these candidates who may have to leave Canada once their temporary permit is expired?
So what we're looking at options right now to figure out how to keep people here who are already working in jobs that businesses are relying on. But I need to come back to one of the points I made in response to your initial question. We know that there is a labor shortage in Canada. We intend to use immigration to help address the labor shortage in Canada. But we need to remind Canadians who are seeking to come to Canada or businesses that are looking for employees, there is no shortage of economic migrants that are in the process right now to come to Canada, some in the across a variety of different economic streams. The federal skilled worker stream is a really excellent tool to bring people who have serious talents to Canada. We are looking at dealing with some of the folks who are in Canada now, but we haven't come up with the perfect solution quite yet. We also will be continuing to process people who are in the inventory in other economic streams. So you'll forgive me if I won't agree that there's one specific stream that will provide the only opportunity for businesses to secure access to workers. We have to look across all of our lines of business to make sure that we're maximizing the potential to get people here more quickly, and we'll continue to look for ways to target those sectors who've got the most acute labor needs to make sure that our immigration system is meeting the needs of the Canadian economy, so we can bust out of the COVID-19 pandemic and get on with the economic recovery as quickly and as forcefully as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Rafi Bujkanian from CBC News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Thanks. Good morning, Minister Fraser. Your move to have people involved in the family reunification process have the ability to go online and directly obtain information updates. That seems to address the criticism of transparency, but that criticism exists in other streams as well. We've talked to, permanent residents, we've talked to refugees, we've talked to student applicants who say that they're just unable to obtain timely updates. Sometimes they have to lodge access to information requests to find out about their own cases and where they're at. So is there any move to allow them to obtain updates directly online as well?
Thanks so much for this important question. And look, the short-term answer is yes, but we need to do more work before we have a system that's ready for them. The family reunification case tracker that I mentioned is going to be launched next month, which begins tomorrow, by the way. The month, of course, not the system. So this is a very short period of time before we roll out the first case tracker, and we started with family reunification. My vision for Canada's immigration system is that we will pivot to the extent possible to a digital system on every line of business. It is more efficient, it is more timely, there's cost savings to the government, and it, most importantly, can improve the client experience and still meet the needs of our communities and our economy. This is really essential. If we want to pivot to a modern system, we have to use the technology that a modern system can provide. One of the additional benefits to this particular change is when I talk to my colleagues across different parties, a lot of them have reflected on the fact that they feel as though that their constituency offices are becoming a place for calls to go when there wasn't an answer from the department that the constituent liked to hear, or they couldn't get an answer on in a timely way. 80% of the calls that are coming through the line that MPs' offices have access to are seeking status updates. If we can provide the status update to individuals starting in the family reunification stream and expanding it over time to other lines of business that IRCC is responsible for, we have the opportunity to dramatically reduce choke points in the system that will improve our capacity right across the department to provide better and more timely services. So that's a very long-winded way, I appreciate, of saying the answer is yes, but in the short term, we're ready today to share that we'll be moving forward with the case tracker for family reunification, but the longer term vision is that we're going to expand this tool across other lines of business as well.
Thanks. And your mandate letter mentions making the citizenship application process free for permanent residents who have fulfilled the requirements needed to obtain it. When's that going to happen?
Look, I think you can appreciate that today's announcement didn't address that issue. We do intend to move forward with the making the citizen application process free for people who want to become citizens. We want to reduce barriers for those who are thinking about making their application. I don't have news to report today, I'm afraid, on the date in which that will happen. But when we're ready to share that news, of course, we'd be more than happy to share in a very public way the timelines under which we expect to have that ready.
So, guys, we still have, I would say, 7 minutes left to this press conference, so we'll go over to the next question, operator, please.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question est de Francis Alain, le Journal de Montréal. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur le ministre. D'abord, écoutez, je suis un peu surpris, mais ma première question va porter sur la conférence de presse même. Vous avez tout était 100% en anglais. Vous êtes ministre de l'Immigration, des Réfugiés, de la Citoyenneté du Canada. Est-ce que le fait français est important pour vous? Est-ce que c'est respectueux pour la majorité du Québec qui parle français et les francophones au Canada? Quel message envoyez-vous d'offrir votre présentation 100% unilingue en anglais?
Juste un moment, et je m'excuse. J'ai juste commencé mes études en français avant l'élection de 2015. C'est très difficile pour moi de comprendre les questions parce que j'ai trouvé mes collègues qui parlent français pour la première langue parlent plus vite et je n'ai pas l'habilité pour comprendre les questions maintenant. C'est possible pour poser les questions en anglais. C'est difficile et je m'excuse. J'ai fait une promesse et j'ai continué mes études chaque semaine avec un professeur parce que c'est essentiel.
I did my master at McGill and I speak Spanish, but we are here in Québec and Canada, donc je vais reposer ma question en français. Est-ce que vous trouvez ça acceptable que vous, en tant que ministre de l'Immigration, des Réfugiés, de la Citoyenneté, vous venez d'offrir une présentation 100% en anglais et vous ne comprenez pas le français? Est-ce que ça envoie un message positif aux faits francophones au Canada? Voilà ma question.
Non, c'est essentiel pour le gouvernement d'offrir des services en les deux langues. Mais c'est parce que la raison pour moi de continuer mes études en français. J'ai juste dit, j'ai commencé mes études en français avant l'élection de 2015. Et c'est très difficile pour moi maintenant de comprendre les questions en français parce que j'ai trouvé les francophones parler plus vite pour mes oreilles. Mais j'ai continué mes études en français parce que c'est important pour moi de parler français avec les Canadiens et Canadiens et c'est essentiel pour ne pas juste parler français mais contribuer à beaucoup de places pour les nouveaux arrivants qui parlent français au Québec et dehors Québec. If you'll allow me to offer a few comments in English, I think it's really important for me not only to continue my work in French to speak to Francophone communities across Canada, including in Quebec, but our policies also need to reflect the linguistic duality that we're so proud of in Canada. It's part of our cultural identity to be a country that is bilingual and embraces both official languages. And you're going to see during my tenure as the Minister of Immigration that I don't continue to just improve my French, but that I also work very hard to embrace a national strategy for Francophone immigration and to continue to support the French language in everything that I do. It's something that makes me very proud to be Canadian, and it's a focus I want to bring to this position.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question is from Murad Ahmadi from The Logic. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Minister, applicants for temporary residence and their lawyers have been expressing concern about the department's use of Chinook, a case triage system that was built internally without legal oversight. You were referring to new data analytics and advanced analytics systems, which I understand are designed to replace Chinook. Refusal rates have gone up since Chinook was introduced, and I understand you say the system isn't making decisions, it isn't even recommending decisions. But specifically, are you concerned that immigration officers may be failing to properly review applications because of the way that this technology works, and therefore denying qualified applicants, or at least not giving them sufficient grounds for refusals?
Thanks, and this is a really important question. I think there's two elements to this. The first element is that we have to ask ourselves, do we want to embrace new and modern digital tools to improve our processes? In my mind, the answer to that question is yes, and I drew attention to the fact that we've seen an 87% increase in efficiency through the use of data analytics to sort applications in certain ways. On the flip side of that coin, you have to say, if we're going to embrace a modern and digital system, we have to make sure that we do it in a way that protects the ability of individuals to have their privacy concerns addressed and to make sure that they get a fair opportunity to make their case when they're coming through a particular process. On this second element, it's something that I will always be concerned about, but from the advice that I've received and the data that I've seen, the concerns that I would normally have haven't actually been borne out by the data. That said, I'm going to continue to watch the use of these tools very closely, because the quality of the job that an AI system can do or that data can provide depends on the quality of the data and the rules that you put in place to assess that data. So we're going to continue to watch to make sure that we're not creating a system by coincidence or consequence rather than by design ends up discriminating against people based on certain features. But I have faith that the system is, the benefits it's providing are well worth it, and the potential drawbacks are things that we can protect against if we continue to watch for the consequences of using these systems. So to date, I'm not particularly concerned with what I've seen, but we need, as we embrace a change to a digital system, to, on a continuous basis, monitor the impact that this system is having across our lines of business.
So, Minister, you said you've seen data that reassures you. Will you make that data public, and will you consult with applicants and immigration lawyers and consultants about the replacement for Chinook that the department has commissioned Accenture to build?
So look, I've already been consulting with those in the legal profession who have concerns about the ability for counsel to engage with the system, and we're looking at what we can do to accommodate some of their concerns, because I think they're fairly made. I think in terms of the advanced analytics and the systems that we're using, I'm always hesitant to say we'll start publishing everything, because there can be privacy concerns about it. But we'll have I'll have a conversation. I'll use this question as a motivation to have a conversation with our department officials, and whatever we're able to share, I'd be pleased to.
Merci. Minister, can we squeeze in one last question?
Yes, yeah.
OK, donc, opérateur, dernière question.
Certainement. Thank you. So the last question will be from Janice Dixon from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking our questions. And my last question. A former Afghan employee of the Canadian Embassy in Kabul was evacuated safely to Canada. And he told me that he found out last week that his brother, who was meant to come here eventually, was killed. And he suspects by the Taliban and says his family there are in great danger, and he's worried now about his brother's kids. I'm wondering, what's your message to this family and others who have de facto family members who are still waiting to come here?
First of all, Janice, thank you for your reporting on Afghanistan. From the very beginning, the work that you're doing is extremely important, and to all others who've covered Afghanistan as well. Look, my heart sank as you shared this with me just now. The situation in Afghanistan remains very bleak for thousands and thousands of people who may qualify and want to come to Canada. The circumstances that they're facing and the fact that they may be persecuted on the basis that they contributed to the Government of Canada's efforts is the justification for our commitment to bring 40,000 Afghan refugees, with a specific focus on those who've worked alongside Canada during our presence there. There's going to continue to be challenging circumstances. There's going to continue to be deadly threats by the Taliban against vulnerable individuals. And I'll remind folks that the Taliban remains a terrorist organization under Canadian law. I'm doing everything that I can to expedite the movement of people to Canada from Afghanistan and people who may qualify who are currently in third countries. This is not an easy file. There are heartbreaking examples that I hear about on a daily basis. This is particularly difficult to hear, but we are going to do whatever we can to work to bring those who've worked alongside Canada and their families here as part of the 40,000 Afghan refugee commitment that we've made, and I remain committed to.
And I realize, you've reiterated the challenge of getting people out of the country, but can you provide any updates on how that effort is going when you're, looking specifically at those in the country?
Sure. So we are continually discussing our efforts with like-minded countries around the world, with international organizations, and with countries in the region who could provide potential partnerships. I hesitate to go too far because there are certain conversations that are in progress that are very important to this effort. We're working with partners like the United States to discuss what we may be able to do. We're working with partners like the UAE to figure out how we can better arrange for the safe passage of folks outside of Afghanistan. There are some people who've been able to move outside of Afghanistan now. What we continue to lack, for perhaps obvious reasons to those who know the situation in Afghanistan, is a Canadian presence inside the country that allows us to process people and secure their safe passage outside of Afghanistan in large numbers all at once. This is something we're going to continue to work with, not just with state partners in the region and like-minded states around the world, but also international organizations that are seeking to ramp up their efforts, including the UNHCR, including the International Organization for Migration, and frankly, including regional blocs like the European Union, who are looking at different options to potentially establish a presence in the region. We're going to continue to have these conversations with all of our partners to see if we can better facilitate the movement of people outside of Afghanistan. Frankly, it remains an enormous challenge, but it's a challenge that we're committed to helping solve, because we are not going to go back on our commitment to bring 40,000 Afghan refugees to Canada, including so many of those who've worked alongside us during our mission there.